At the beginning of the movie, we see Friedrich Weimer, who was the young son of a poor man working in a factory. He wanted to continue his education, but his family's financial condition made it impossible. Besides doing small jobs in the neighborhood, Friedrich also had a keen interest in boxing. He trained at a small gym in the city, where he honed his technique significantly. One day, a boxing trainer visited the gym. He was also a teacher at a Nazi school named Napula, and brought along some of his professional boxer students. One of them was set to fight Friedrich in a boxing match at the gym. Friedrich fought with great intensity and impressed the trainer. However, when the moment came to knock out his opponent to win the match, he felt compassion for his rival and chose not to, ultimately losing the fight. Despite not winning, he succeeded in leaving a lasting impression on the trainer. The trainer advised Friedrich to enroll in Napula, assuring him that completing his education there could lead to a career as an army officer, securing his financial future. The only obstacle was that his father was strictly against this. He outright refused to sign his admission letter. Determined to fulfill his dreams, Friedrich forged his father's signature and ran away from home. The next morning, his parents received a letter from Friedrich in which he wrote that he was heading to Allenstein to join the Napula Academy. The grand building of Napula resembled a fortress, leaving Friedrich awestruck. Just then, the trainer arrived and introduced him to his roommate, Christoph. Christoph showed Friedrich their room and told him to be at the auditorium within 15 minutes. When Friedrich wore the uniform for the first time, he couldn't hide his happiness despite trying. During the headmaster's entire speech in the assembly, a faint smile lingered on Friedrich's face. After the assembly, Christoph introduced him to their other roommates. Suddenly, a senior student named Jocker appeared and ordered Friedrich to do 10 push-ups as a punishment for not organizing his locker properly. However, the trainer intervened and stopped the ordeal immediately. That night, Friedrich couldn't sleep and wanted to talk to Christoph, but lights-out rules didn't allow any conversation. The next morning, a new roommate was assigned to their room, a boy named Albrecht Stein, who was the son of the city's governor. Unlike others, Albrecht had no interest in becoming an officer. Instead, he loved writing poems and stories. He helped Friedrich set up his bed, and the two quickly became friends. Later, their training instructor arrived, a stern man named Karl. One of the students reported to Karl that Friedrich's roommate named Siggy wet his bed for the second time in a month. As punishment, he was humiliated by being forced to bring his mattress from the yard and urinate on it in front of everyone. He was shamed for something that was likely beyond his control. In class, they were taught about Hitler's speeches, writing essays praising his intelligence and wisdom. They were drilled with the idea that only the strongest survive in the world. This theory justified the harshness of Napula's culture, where dominance and submission were part of daily life. Alongside academics, they received training in marksmanship and handling various weapons. Friedrich joined the boxing club, and it was revealed that Napula had once been a champion in inter-school boxing competitions. However, they had been on a losing streak for years. The trainer pinned his hopes on Friedrich, confident that he could finally bring home a medal. As time passed, Friedrich's friendship with Albrecht grew stronger. One night, the two took a risky trip to the servants' quarters, where they secretly watched a girl changing her clothes. Luckily, they weren't caught, but one thing was clear. Whether it's 1982 or 2024, boys will be boys. Over the next few months, their training intensified and Friedrich's skills improved significantly. When the day of the big match arrived, he fought with all his strength, pushing his opponent to the ropes. To win, however, he needed to knock his opponent out completely, even though the rival had already given up. This time, Friedrich decided not to hold back. Determined to win, he finally gave it his all and secured victory, proving to everyone and himself that he was capable of greatness. The crowd erupted in applause for Friedrich, except Albrecht, who criticized him for striking an opponent who had already surrendered. While all the senior officers praised Friedrich's performance, leaving him on cloud 9, Albrecht brought him back to reality. He bluntly pointed out that Friedrich had become just as ruthless as the others. The next morning, Siggy wet his bed again. Jocker threatened him, saying that if he didn't pay him hush money by dinner, he would report the incident directly to the trainer. That day, the trainer was teaching them how to use bayonets in the field. However, during the exercise, a soldier accidentally dropped a live grenade. The so-called brave trainer fled the scene, leaving everyone to fend for themselves. Chaos ensued, with everyone frozen in fear, but one boy showed true courage. Siggy. He quickly jumped onto the grenade, using his body to shield others. A massive explosion followed, tearing tearing Siggy apart. His sacrifice saved his peers. The next day, Siggy was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor for his bravery and selflessness. However, the loss left Friedrich shaken and profoundly introspective. The glory of his previous triumph now felt hollow in the face of such a selfless act. The irony was glaring. The very man who had punished Siggy, calling him weak and cowardly for wetting his bed, turned out to be the biggest coward when it truly mattered, running away in a moment of crisis. Every soldier present was furious at the trainer for his cowardice. The next day, the trainer was giving the soldiers a session on strengthening their abdominal muscles. To demonstrate his own strength, he asked one of them to punch him in the stomach. Friedrich stepped forward, but his intention wasn't just to comply, it was to revenge Siggy's death. He delivered a powerful punch, leaving the trainer gasping for breath. Later, Albrecht's father invited Friedrich to his mansion for his birthday celebration. The grand mansion left Friedrich awestruck, but what shocked him even more was how little Albrecht's father valued him. The governor publicly stopped Albrecht from reciting poetry, making it clear that he thought poetry and stories were unfit pursuits for a man. Instead, he wanted his son to emulate someone like Friedrich. That evening, when most of the men were heavily intoxicated, they coerced Friedrich and Albrecht into a boxing match. Both were hesitant, but the officers forced them to fight. While Friedrich was almost guaranteed to win, he didn't want to hurt his friend. However, Albrecht made it clear that he didn't want anyone's pity and urged Friedrich to fight with all his strength. The match ended quickly, with Friedrich delivering a single powerful punch that knocked Albrecht out. His father, watching from the sidelines, Albrecht's father and his friends began singing Friedrich praises, while poor Albrecht quietly slipped away to his room. As winter set in, Friedrich and Albrecht returned to the academy. One night, they were suddenly summoned to the governor's office, where they learned that a group of Soviet prisoners had escaped from a nearby village after stealing weapons and killing several people. The cadets were ordered to take rifles and given shoot-on-sight instructions. Shortly after setting out, they spotted some figures sneaking away and opened fire indiscriminately, killing them all. But upon closer inspection, their hearts sank. They were not Soviet prisoners, but innocent children. Albrecht desperately tried to save one of the injured children, but before he could, his father arrived and shot the child. Albrecht stood there, horrified, watching his father round up other children and kill them one by one. Albrecht's mind raced with conflicting thoughts as he struggled to reconcile his father's cruelty. Meanwhile, Friedrich got into a scuffle with another cadet, which led to him being jailed for 24 hours. In literature class, the teacher asked the students to write a poem about winter. Albrecht was called to recite his poem in front of everyone. Initially, he described his feelings about winter, but soon his poem took a different turn, criticizing Nazi ideology. Albrecht's poem openly criticized the events of the previous night, holding his father accountable for the innocent children's deaths. The teacher took him to the principal's office, where his father was summoned. The principal asked Albrecht to write a better poem and present it the next day, but Albrecht firmly refused, stating that he stood by his words. When Friedrich was released from detention and learned about the incident, he was confused about why Albrecht felt the need to recite the poem publicly. This led to a heated argument between the two, but ultimately, they broke down in each other's arms, crying over the shared weight of their emotions. For their next training exercise, the cadets were tasked with crossing a frozen lake by entering one hole and emerging from another. Christoph was the first to go and skillfully connected the two openings with a rope to make it easier for everyone else. When it was Albrecht's turn, he jumped into the water but got stuck midway. Friedrich quickly realized something was wrong and tried to help, but before he could do anything, Albrecht waved at him one last time through the ice, saying a silent goodbye. Moments later, Albrecht drowned, disappearing into the depths of the freezing water. Friedrich was left helpless, his only response to the tragedy being tears of grief and despair. His friends took him back to their room, where he spent the entire night writing a poem in honor of his late friend. However, the principal refused to publish it, stating that Albrecht hadn't died a hero. He had committed suicide. Meanwhile, Albrecht's father received the news of his death, but showed no sorrow, coldly remarking that his son was weak. Friedrich was grieving deeply, but his boxing trainer reminded him that the final match of the boxing tournament was the next day, and that he needed to be fully prepared. On the day of the match, the governor was present among the spectators, smiling as if his son had never died. Friedrich fought fiercely in the first round, dominating his opponent entirely. However, seeing the governor's smug smile rattled him. Overwhelmed by his emotions, Friedrich began losing deliberately, thinking he couldn't let the murderers of his friend win. In the end, his opponent claimed victory. The governor coldly remarked that Friedrich had had brought disgrace upon the Academy by losing yet another medal. The next day, Friedrich was publicly humiliated, forced to strip off all his clothes and walk naked back to his room. Shortly after, he was expelled from the Academy. In the end, Friedrich packed his belongings and left for his hometown. Thank you for watching this recap of Before the Fall. If you enjoyed this recap, please like, subscribe, and check out other movie recap on our channel.